Okay, so hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Greg Bem, and I'm one of the faculty librarians here at Spokane Community College. And this session is called GenAI and Ethics in Conversation and in Practice. At this moment, we only have online participants, so that's interesting but helpful for me. We'll see if anyone shows up late. Sometimes they do, and we will go from there. So as noted, all images in this presentation, unless otherwise noted, were created with the GenAI tool DALL-E 3, which is built into Chat GPT. We'll come back to the fact that I've acknowledged this, in a little bit. A couple notes before we dive in. This session is being recorded. I've already mentioned that to folks online today. So the recording will be shared on our library website in our GenAI guide. Keep that in mind in terms of privacy when you're contributing to the conversation, either in chat or out loud. I will also send an email follow-up later this week to the participants and the registrants for this session, so you will have access to the recording easily. Couple notes about this workshop in particular. This workshop is designed to introduce various concepts and conversations around ethics and AI. This workshop was not created for any particular academic program. It's designed to be open to anybody that is at the college, and that's for this quarter right now, as we're doing it live and with the recording. And also the recording will be shared out and available to anybody at the college. This is not a broad introduction to the technology, the GenAI technology, or the individual platforms and tools of GenAI. If you're interested in getting an introduction, please watch the recording or attend a future session that is the introductory session. And also, for deeper dives, we have 3 coming up this quarter covering Gemini and Claude and Perplexity. So if you're interested in diving deeper into any of those this quarter, you're welcome to join those later. This is not a deep dive into philosophy or ethics. I'm super into philosophy. I love thinking about ethics, but I'm not a philosopher, and we don't have time to go down that rabbit hole as far as it will go. In fact, many people study ethics their entire lives. And so it's a very large discipline under philosophy that you can explore. That being said, this workshop is open to folks of all backgrounds and skill levels. So even if you've only used GenAI tools a little bit, I think you'll get a lot out of this presentation. All right. A little bit about me. I've been running GenAI workshops since 2022. Really, within months after ChatGPT became popular, I was starting to think about providing workshops, and I have thus continued to do so, and they've evolved over time, of course. I am passionate about emerging technology. I think it's really fascinating to be on the cutting edge of technology. As a librarian, I'm interested in how, we're all looking at technology in terms of getting information and doing our research and other types of work. But I am also just into technology in general. And a lot of folks ask me where I stand when it comes to certain types of emerging technology, including GenAI. And I bring in a mixture of concern and curiosity. I don't think that GenAI is the end of the world per se, but I also don't think it's the greatest thing that's ever been invented. I think that my opinion lies somewhere in the middle, and I encourage everyone to walk the middle path and have a middle ground. Supporter of technology, equity, and access. As a librarian at a community college and someone who supports not only college students, but members of the public, I really believe in thinking about how a lot of folks don't get access to technology, or they're not trained or educated in how technology works. And so my role here at the community college is to respond to that and to try to provide educational opportunities around technology like GenAI and help make it easier to access for more people. So today's agenda, what is generative artificial intelligence? We're going to briefly revisit the definition of GenAI. Then we'll talk for a little bit about ethics and what ethics, the concept of ethics is. And then we'll dive into the big ethical issues around GenAI, which is the greatest number of slides in this slideshow. Yesterday, we had a lot of people in the room and a lot of ideas and a lot of conversation that came up. So we actually weren't able to get through most of my slides, but we'll see how we go today. Maybe we'll actually get through all of them. But I do encourage folks to chime in, provide ideas, contribute if possible, because we all have a lot of perspective to explore when it comes to this topic. And yeah, does this sound like a good agenda for today? Is everyone on board?
Yeah, that sounds really good, especially on the ethical issues. That's something I haven't really thought about, but it's essentially interesting.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, so let's keep going. I'm going to ask you first, and this was mentioned earlier, but we're all here for different reasons. Can I ask each of you in the room today, if you're open to sharing, what brought you here today? Do you have any specific interests around Gen AI in general, or do you have any questions that you've come with that you want to share, and I can refer back to as we go forward?
Yeah, I was interested in this presentation because I'm currently in software development, so AI gets used a lot, and like you said, I kind of want to be in the middle, not too pro or too against it, but somewhere in the middle, and just kind of get more of a good feeling for myself. Well, but one of the questions that, or like one of the things that I want to know is like more on the how far can AI truly get? I know it's in the
Mm,
starting ages. It's relatively new, but that's my curiosity of in 5 or 10 years, how far will it exponentially grow, or will it be steady? But yeah, that's one of my questions.
that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And I will try to get back to that in this presentation. We talk a little bit about it in the intro session as well. But that's a really, really, really great thing to ask that we can all continue asking. Any other folks want to chime in about what brought them today or questions that may be here that you may have? I'll give a few seconds and we'll move forward. Okay. So we'll start off with what is Gen AI. If you're here, you probably have heard of it before, or you know a little bit about it, but one of the definitions I continue to enjoy using is a simple definition from IBM, a major tech company. Generative AI refers to deep learning models that can generate high quality text, images, and other content based on the data they were trained on. So this is a very simple one sentence definition. There are a lot of applications around generative AI technology that are continuing to emerge every day. You can look up generative AI on your own and explore it seemingly forever. You might also be interested in learning about machine learning technology and deep learning models, large language models. Those terms will connect you with much more technical information about how Gen AI works. But essentially, the key thing to remember is that this technology is being created and evolving based on training on data sets that are very large in scope. Millions and millions of documents that are from various sources, including the live internet. And the ability to learn how to understand those resources, that data, in order to generate new data. which can include documents and text responses, computer code, images, video, audio, etc. It's looking at other examples, a lot of different examples, synthesizing those examples together to come up with some kind of output that you see that responds to your prompt when you're using the tools. Some of you may have heard of some of these, or you actively use these today. Popular GenAI tools include ChatGPT, probably the most well-known and one of the first GenAI tools to get popular for the public. Copilot, which uses ChatGPT technology and is a tool that was created by Microsoft. Gemini, which is a tool created by Google. Perplexity, which is an answer engine, which is often considered or often described as a GenAI search tool, similar to Google or Bing. Claude, which was created by Anthropic. DALL-E 3, which is built into ChatGPT, and again is used to create the images, most of the images in this PowerPoint. Midjourney, which is for images, Stable Diffusion, which is for images and video, and Sora, which has not yet been released, but was created by OpenAI, who created ChatGPT and DALL-E 3, and that's also for video, GenAI video. So let's spend a few moments to think about the concept of ethics. I want to point out in this image that there are multiple hands and they're all reaching for a scale. This is how DALL-E 3 visually represented the concept of ethics. I also like to point out that there's a light bulb illuminating the scene, kind of like a light bulb going off above our head as we have a new idea. There's question marks, there's check boxes, there's hands being raised, there's individuals and group participants, and the word right, meaning not the direction, but correct. So as we think about ethics, really basically we're thinking about value systems that we have in the world, our own individual values and community values. What is right? What is wrong? What is the balance between right and wrong? And how do we actually get to an understanding of what is right and wrong and our morals in everyday life? Let's look at a definition provided by this scholar, Resnick. Resnick is writing through a health perspective, but I really like and find useful this statement from Resnick in 2020. And I will read it. When most people think of ethics or morals, they think of rules for distinguishing between right and wrong, such as the golden rule, which is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or a code of professional conduct like the Hippocratic Oath, which health professionals often have to take, and that starts with, first of all, do no harm, or a religious creed like the Ten Commandments, which includes thou shalt not kill, or wise aphorisms like the sayings of Confucius. This is the most common way of defining ethics, norms for conduct that distinguish between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. And those norms are often either fluid and commonly or uncommonly accepted by people in our space, our society, our community, or they're formalized. So like in law, in policy. So for example, we are living here today in Spokane, Washington, and we have specific laws that that govern us or guide us and control certain aspects of behavior based on these normalized forms of conduct, these agreements that we have. And if you want to Google social contract, that's another rabbit hole you can explore to understand kind of a lot of the ways that we look at how we get to this place. But regardless of how we got to there, and regardless of what we believe and how we agree, those standards are in place. I am not allowed to go out there and steal someone's goods. I am not allowed to go over there and walk up to someone and exert physical violence upon them. That is against the norms of conduct in society. Similarly, we live in a society where stealing artwork and using it for one's own, or someone else's ideas and using it for one's own, would be considered intellectual theft or plagiarism. So that's the first aspect of ethics I want to highlight. Resnick continues, and I think the second piece is equally as important, to say that one may also define ethics as a method, a procedure, or a perspective for deciding how to act and for analyzing complex problems and issues. For instance, in considering a complex issue like global warming, one may take an economic, ecological, political, or ethical perspective on the problem. While an economist might examine the cost and benefits of various policies related to global warming, an environmental ethicist could examine the ethical values and principles at stake. So when we're thinking about ethics, we have on one hand, and I don't want to use this as like a balance metaphor because that's completely different. But on the one hand, we're thinking of norms and values that we have in our space, what we believe in, what is right and what is wrong. And then on the other hand, there's this aspect that things are relatively ongoing and fluid. They are part of a process, and they include perspective from all of us that are part of that process. And that includes conversations, that includes education and discussion like today. That includes where we are in society with various issues. That also includes formalities, such as, does the college have a perspective? Do you as individuals have perspectives? Do I have a perspective? How is it all contributing? And how does this lead from beginning to think about the issues and identify them to taking action and responding to these issues in an ethical way? And then where is there ethical and unethical behavior that contributes to understanding and leading to action? So that was a lot. I want to acknowledge that. A lot to ponder, a lot that's going on as we're thinking about what ethics are. Before we start connecting this concept of ethics to GenAI, does anyone have any questions, or is there any thoughts or reactions to any of what I just went over?
Yeah, I just had a quick thought when you mentioned ethics. Is it kind of like when AI gives you an answer on how to act on a certain behavior? Would that will be hard to determine if AI should be able to give you the information, but
That's a great.
is that like kind of where like this is kind of getting on?
That's definitely an ethical issue. What should happen? Who decides or determines what should happen, or what kind of information you're provided? All of those would be, I would say, would be listed under ethical issues around this technology.
Hmm.
And we're going to
And
go examples as well. Yep.
okay, yeah, but I mean, one of the questions that I had also was what what when it's ethical, can it also be um well, let me just hold on to this question. Let me just write this down real quick. But go ahead.
No worries. Yeah. And if it helps to use the chat instead of verbalizing, feel free to do that too. And I can respond to that. But great thoughts, great thoughts. So let's take a step back. We've looked at the definition and some of the ideas around ethics, and you can explore those a lot further just by Googling ethics or doing some basic research on it. Again, we're not going to do a huge dive into ethics today, but we do want to think about, how does ethics relate to Spokane Community College and our life here at the college? And then you can think about these questions as they pertain to other contexts, your future job, your role in society, your experience with family or friends, all the different contexts that we have in our life, these questions could apply. So here at the college, we all are entering this space as individuals. And as individuals, we all have our own sense of values and right and wrong. We carry some of that forward with the rules of society that I mentioned earlier, the laws or the policies that show up in other aspects of our life. But we also have our own values. Well, maybe I agree with this, and maybe I disagree with this. Maybe there is not a law that talks about this, and we're exploring it. We have individual opinions, right? Freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of ideas, intellectual freedom. We are all individuals here in this space. And we need to value that. We need to think about how we all have our own ideas and perspectives. And so I should, for each of you here today, I should value your ideas and your perspective. And then you can look at each other as well as me as having our own individual perspective as well. And that goes along the lines of expertise and knowledge. So I've been, as I mentioned earlier, been exploring this for several years already. What does that mean? What do I bring with my perspective versus someone who might have only just discovered GenAI this quarter? And that doesn't necessarily make my perspective better, but it's going to impact how I view things versus how someone else views things. So we all have personal perspectives that we bring to the concept of ethics. There's also organizational perspectives. So I mentioned law, and I mentioned how various laws impact us at like a higher level. We can also think about organizational perspectives. And in the college, that could be the college's perspective. So does the college have a perspective on GenAI? And I will say right now that we don't have a college-wide perspective other than right now we're all open to exploring what GenAI is at the college. So the college hasn't said you can or cannot use it specifically. They're saying it's up to lower levels within the college and individual levels to determine what is right and wrong. So the organization can also be those lower levels. So instead of the college as a whole, it can be a department here has one perspective, a department here has another one. So for example, the library might have one perspective, the English department might have a perspective, and computer software department might have their perspective, and so on and so forth. Many, 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 many different operating nodes within this network, so to speak. But all of those contribute to the whole. They're all part of this community that we're in. They might not interact directly, but they're all contributing to the college experience, and the college's overall response is from these contributions. And then you can go down organizationally, down to the personal and the individual level. You can go from the college as a whole, the departments, maybe subsections of those departments, and even individual classes. So you might be in a class and your professor might say, hey, have you heard about ChatGPT? Have you used it? And the students then contribute to a conversation within that class. Likewise, the professor might say, I don't like GenAI. I don't want you to use it in my class. So we're not going to use it. And the students may be able to contribute to that conversation, but the professor is determining those rules and the ethical norms for that class. And the opposite may be true too. The professor may say, I want you to use it. I want you to explore it. In this class, it's okay. And they're still determining that kind of ethical baseline in that class. Of course, they might say, you can use it for this, 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 or this, and I want you to consider where this might be good and where this may be bad. So there's a lot of options. There's a big spectrum for how GenAI can be used within the college. But what it comes down to, when we're using it in the college or anywhere else, is this idea of coming to consensus, coming to an agreement or disagreement, and moving on because we continue to move forward. The consensus may be that you have entered a class and the professor says, do not use it. And by continuing to be in the class, you are agreeing to not use it. Or the professor says, you may use it. And by continuing the class, you may choose to use it or not. Um, with ethics, things are very difficult. We all come from very, very interesting backgrounds, right? Some of us may have religious background that helps us determine our values, or we may have been raised in a culture that has really specific values and we identify with those. Or we may be rebels and we may have our own individual reaction to that. We're bringing it all together and we are learning through that process that was mentioned from Resnick a couple slides ago. We're learning about how to use these things. What is appropriate? What is good? What is bad? What is right? What is wrong? And ultimately that leads to critical thinking. And we have the opportunity to reflect upon how these tools are being used and thinking about critically what we can do and what we should do at the college level. Ideally, those conversations will result in some kind of normalization. And what I mean by normalization is just the way things are. They can be very wide open, as I mentioned earlier, that's how they are. Or they may get stricter, or they may get more open. So the college may eventually say, we have a policy around how to use GenAI or not use it. And if that happens, that will become normalized, and then there will be an expectation, and students will be expected to follow that. Likewise, professors will be expected to. Regardless of how things go over time, whether they get stricter or more open, that path will be a more normalized path. And things can always change, of course. But that's kind of how the way things work. Um, yeah, any thoughts on this before we start moving into some examples?
Yeah, do you think SEC is going to move towards a more open use of Chat GPT in the future?
What I think is things are going to get more specific. We have professors who are now adding statements, like written statements, into their syllabus, and they're learning how to create statements for assignments, meaning they can teach students how to use these tools more effectively. I do not see this becoming more open just in terms of general use. I think a lot of professors have very strong opinions that they've had for a long time about this type of technology. What I will say, though, is that, from the student perspective, I think more and more students will be using it more and more often because these tools are becoming more and more used at a younger level. And so students that are in high school or in middle school or in elementary school, they're being exposed to them. And that normalization is starting in certain ways for younger people. And that's all going to be brought forward to college. And obviously, the community college has students of all ages, but we do have many young students, and the younger generations are going to bring it more normalized uh, more often. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answered my question, and it makes sense because when I was in elementary, there was no GPT. There was laptops, and my mom, she never had laptops. It was all book and pen. But it's interesting how the young generations are using technology and they bring it up in the real world and in college.
Yeah, that was a great question. Thanks for asking that. All right, so we're going to go into the ethical issues, and I think we'll have time to go through most of them. It's going to be me talking a lot, but you're welcome to interrupt at any point. Before we get into the examples that I've kind of collected over the years, I want to ask the room, do you have any examples? We've mentioned a couple already, but do you have any examples of other ethical issues that you've thought about where using Gen AI technology could be good or bad, right or wrong, or some of the gray area in between?
Earlier, like you mentioned about students using ChatGPT to kind of cheat, I feel like that's an ethical issue. But with that being said, that's the thing that it's important for not to get the answer, but also understand how it got to the answer. In even if you're using ChatGPT, you can ask it to like break it down for you. or so make sure that you understand, because when using copy and paste, you don't really, it's kind of like you use it and forget it, and if you forget it, then you're not really learning. So I think that's a
Yeah,
good issue right now.
that is a huge issue for especially here at the college. Yeah. Cognition, memory, you mentioned the word learning. How will this technology impact all of that? And ultimately, will that impact or the potential for that impact be a problem for us as students and as people in the world? I think another analogy is when we're Googling something, looking up information online, does that impact our ability to memory or memorize, or are we relying on being able to instantly look things up? And is that damaging the way we behave around memory and how we memorize information? Um, and yes, how do the tools get to the answer? How do they formulate the answer? What information resources, what data are they using in their data set to formulate the answer is another big question. Those are great examples. So here we have the first of the many slides that are on different categories of ethical issues. One is academic dishonesty. So in higher ed, when students use the tools and they use the tools without telling people, telling the professor, telling their peers, is that a problem? Is there an issue with looking up the information in ChatGPT, for example, versus some other way of finding information? And where is the line around how much you can use this tool or should you even be able to use it at all? When you are contributing generated information or generated content, for example, you ask the tool to write your 5-paragraph paper for you and you submit it, is that a form of plagiarism? Are you stealing information from other people and using it as your own when it's not your own? And a lot of professors, a lot of educators say that yes, that is plagiarism. Now, I'm asking the question because it is a ethical issue. And again, it goes to values and understanding how things work to lead us to understanding whether it's right or wrong. Some people, with some of the generated content, for example, let's say you ask it for really simple computer code that you could come up with on your own if you wanted to type it all out, but it's able to generate that for you in 1 second. Some people might say that that isn't really plagiarism because it's so simple, such a basic piece of information. And so maybe the tools generating the output, maybe some of it could be plagiarism, but some of it is not. That's why this is an ethical dilemma. There is a variation in student use, and this is a big issue as well, how we define GenAI use overall. Writing original text, like the 5-paragraph essay example, versus computer code, versus creating spreadsheets, versus editing one's original work. Understanding and being able to generalize the GenAI technology, that is another problem, another ethical problem. Because can we generalize? Can we say all of it is the same, or are there variations in use? And how do we get to what one right, one wrong, or something in between for all of the different variations? This was mentioned just a minute ago, but another issue is that we're facing a cultural normalization. We're seeing the use of these tools in really early ages. I went to a webinar where even a second grade teacher has started using some of these tools with their students. And if they're learning these tools super early, how does that impact us when they arrive to the college? Are we the ones to determine what is right or wrong if they've already determined what is right or wrong in other grades earlier on in their lives? And also one similar analogy, I should update this slide, but if someone is coming back to the college after they've been in the workforce and their job is using these tools, and it's normalized and they use it in certain ways already there, what happens when they arrive to the college and we have our own norms here? For educators, there's some issues as well. You know, it's not just the student experience. Educators and other people in different jobs, in other disciplines, other fields, we're always creating new materials. We're creating materials when we are teaching. We're creating materials for our jobs, like when we're doing our office work. What does it mean to use these tools to generate materials? And is that authentic? You all are paying to be at this college. Are you okay with me using a tool to come up with all the content that I teach? It will save me a lot of time, but is it authentic? Is it still valuable? And similarly, it can help automate things. Is it okay if I use a GenAI tool to automate my grading of student work? Or do you as a student expect the educator to go in and grade individually every student's work? Where is the line? Where is what is right and what is wrong with grading and using GenAI to grade or assess? And then that all can lead to conversations around personalization versus depersonalization. If all of us start using ChatGPT here as educators, and we all have the same voice of ChatGPT, is that okay for you as a student? Is that okay for the community? Is it okay if we all sound the same, if all of our materials look the same? Or is there an expectation around us having our own personality? Me as one of the professors here, should I have my own personality, my own quirks, my own style of teaching? Or are we okay having it standardized? It's an open question and another problem that we're facing here as it becomes easier for me to just use ChatGPT to create the materials for me. That being said, I will say that other than the images in this presentation, I created all of this by hand from scratch. I did not use a tool to generate this slideshow. Access and cost. So one thing that's problematic with any learning technology or technology that can get us information is whether it's free or does it cost something. Right now, if you want the latest and greatest features in any GenAI tool, there is most likely a version that costs money, usually a subscription fee. And then there's the free version. Or some tools like Midjourney don't even have a free version anymore. And so what does that mean? Who determines the cost? Can everybody afford it? If you can't afford it, is that problematic? Who determines the cost and who gets to have access and who does not? Similarly, accessible design. You know, like a lot of these tools are actually pretty easy to use and they're designed to be easy to use. But some students may require more training on them. Some people might require more training on them. Some people may not be able to use them because of disabilities they have. So that is with most technology, but I wanted to highlight that as well as an ethical issue with GenAI as well. Limitations on output. So if you're using the free version or you're using a version that you're trained on, there may be some limitations on what it can do versus other tools that can do more. And so that is something to consider as well. Who's providing the training and education on these tools? How will there be a hierarchy in society around who gets to use these tools and who doesn't based on the training they receive? And so you may be in an individual position where you have the ability to go use these tools, or maybe you learned how to use technology early on and it comes easily for you. What about the people where it's difficult? Who's providing that education? And then there's also this idea that these organizations that are building these tools have the opportunity to make a lot of money. They can make these proprietary tools versus some folks who are in the software industry. They believe in open access. They believe in open license. They want the tools to be free and open to everybody. That's kind of a historical perspective on technology, but there's going to be variations in that perspective. Should people be profiting off of this technology? Another big category is user data and privacy. So when you're using these tools, you need to be aware that the companies that are that have been launching and are managing these platforms, they are collecting user information. Every time you use a tool like ChatGPT, you're not, there's no guarantee that what you enter is not being tracked or recorded or contributing to the overall system. So as you enter in your prompts and your information, you need to be aware of that. But also, should there be guardrails? Should there be some kind of restrictions on what those companies can do? So, for example, if you enter in a social security number or a credit card number, should those companies be allowed to store that information versus should they be banned from storing that information? Likewise, on an organizational level, should the college say you are not allowed to enter social security card or credit card information into the system? There are implications here also with the concept of memory. So in the early days, these tools did not track internally for you, did not track your history of your chats or your prompts. But now, especially with ChatGPT, we're seeing memory, where you can activate a feature and it will remember what you have contributed to the system and be able to refer back to your previous chats, your previous contributions. This actually goes to this question that came up earlier today. How far can AI get? And if it's remembering, even if it's just remembering between you and it, you as an individual user, that could be really interesting. There could be interesting implications for what it can do down the road if it remembers its entire history with you. This is a really big one, technology costs. So there are ethical issues around who is creating all of the data and who is monitoring all the data and refining the systems. And you can Google this, but a lot of the laborers that are helping make these systems so powerful and effective, they're being paid very small amounts of money in the global south. So countries that historically have been exploited for labor, places like India, the Philippines, China, etc. And they're just grinding. They're on computers and they're working every day to help refine a lot of these technologies. Even locally in the US, there's a lot of companies that are paying individuals to refine prompts and respond to some of the uses of these tools by various users. So the exploitation of laborers is a big one. Another cost is how much electricity is being used by these systems. There's just a very large resource cost. And Amazon just actually announced that they're planning on building 4 nuclear reactors here in Washington this year. They just announced it. I don't know when they're building them, but they're launching them specifically to support AI technology. And that's going to be right here, just a couple hours away from us. What is that going to do to the environment? What is that going to do to how much electricity is required to move forward? And with that, what is the environmental impact that these server farms and these nuclear reactors and everything else that goes into creating these systems, what does it have? What negative impact may it have on the environment? So there's a lot of research being done and a lot of folks that are warning the world about where we're going with that environmental impact. And it's a huge concern for many people. And similarly, sustainability. This is specifically with the costs, how much it costs for this technology to exist and operate. And as we move forward, what does it mean to have sustainable systems? And think about that when it comes to normalization. If we're used to being able to use certain tools for our everyday lives, what happens if it's not sustainable? So similar example, if you were told that you no longer could Google something because the technology costs were too big or the environmental impact was such that we no longer could sustainably have Google, how would that impact you in your everyday life? It's a question to ask. From another perspective, workforce and job security. This is probably a big one for us to think about here at the college, but how are these tools and technologies going to lead to automation of a lot of the work that we do? And then what does that mean for us and our jobs? I believe that it's all of our responsibilities as faculty, as educators, as well as students. It's everybody's responsibility when we're in an education system to think about this and learn about this and look at our industries and our fields and think about where we're going with that. You don't want to be left behind if that is the way the world goes. So staying on top of where these automate. If it removes jobs, that's a problem for many people, and many people would say that's an ethical issue. But also, what does it mean for us staying on top of things? So skill sets that we can develop, the literacy that we can get around learning how to use these tools to stay on top of things and be relevant as workers. The idea of working smarter comes up a lot when we think about or hear about Gen AI. That Gen AI tools will allow us to get rid of busy work. That way we can get to do smarter work or more complex tasks. Whether that is the case in any given industry is to be said, and whether it opens up the room for us to work smarter or to work less, or both, is in the air. But at the end of the day, it does require us to learn more. We need to learn more tools. We need to learn more systems. The same way at one point, folks needed to learn Outlook and Microsoft Word in order to be up to date with the times. Now we have to learn more systems with Gen AI in some cases to stay up to date. Take a sip of coffee here and pause. Are there any questions yet before we move forward? Or thoughts?
Yeah, well, thoughts with the or question actually, with AI taking jobs. I maybe I'm not too familiar with this, but maybe it would benefit people to not go to work and just kind of enjoy life. But obviously, it's the money that they can't get paid that kind of lingers in someone's mind and has negative thoughts about this topic. But what are your thoughts about the uh at least for the skill sets or taking a few jobs? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in addition to what I already mentioned, it really depends on the industry and where we're going. I don't know that we've seen yet that jobs have changed substantially. A lot of larger businesses are starting to train employees on using the technology, so it's becoming more normalized in the workforce. We're seeing that already in a lot of different fields. But we're also seeing a lot of the failures of this technology and skepticism as well. So it's kind of in a gray area at this time. But I will say to your point about how it might open up our quality of life and make more time for us to spend with family or do other things. This is not the first time we've seen an optimization, and being able to optimize our capabilities in order to reduce our work. And often this is something that is individual. So if you can figure out a way to do your work faster, then that may and to do your work, that way you get paid what you need to get paid, then you can do that. But it might not be that the organization is doing that. The organization probably doesn't want everyone to work fast or get their work done faster and have more free time. It would just build more work, right? So it might be that you figure it out individually to save yourself time individually. And then if you have your own business or if you have uh, your own role and you're able to do that, then it may allow you as an individual to have that freedom, that greater degree of freedom. There's similar thoughts on like the 4-hour work week and other previous like books and frameworks. We're looking at getting work done quicker or more in a more optimized way. And I think that this will eventually be similar to those ideas. Um, but I will say that it will also be competitive. There are people right now that have quote unquote mastered how to use these technologies. And that has already allowed them to make a lot of money, like on the side, with the projects that they've built out, or the way they've integrated this into new solutions that they've come up with. Um, or they've been able to master it and bring it into their own workflow and save themselves a lot of time already. And then there's some people that, it doesn't save them time. It just adds more to what they're doing. For me, for example, if I did not care about Gen AI, I probably would have a lot more free time because I would be, doing what I already have known for years. But by thinking about Gen AI and bringing that into my world as a librarian, it's just added more on top of a mountain of work that I already do. But I'm passionate about it, and so I'm making room for that. I'm allowing it to take up more of my time because I'm passionate about it.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's also a big part of on an individual, just to have that curiosity of what this would bring, and get more knowledge about this, because it definitely is going to be in the future, or at least in the next 5 years, I believe.
Yeah, for sure. Um, we're at time because this is supposed to end at 50 minutes. I'm just going to go through the last slides quickly, just read the categories before we get to the end, just for the recording's sake. So in addition to workforce job security, there's major issues of bias in data sets, confirmation bias, developer safeguards, issues of transparency. What are the goals of the organizations? What are they doing? What is their big vision of the world? Where is the funding? What is the data being used for? Rules and functions within the technology itself. Authenticity, including issues of misinformation, fake information and hallucinations, which I invite you to look up if you're interested in that. Deep fakes in images and video, and sometimes the inability for these tools to create certain types of text or other output. We have copyright issues. Where does the data come from? How much of work can be used to inform the tool? What about when the user is creating inputs? Where is the copyright around that? Um, Occasionally, I do a visual world workshop where we dive into that a little bit deeper. Authorship and creativity. So if you're creating information in this, what do we talk about when we talk about the uniqueness of what's being generated, um, including citations and statements of use, how and how much generated content can go into what you're creating to make it original. Freedom versus control with these systems. Who's creating regulations? Who's providing oversight? What about the marketplace and how all of us potentially could be contributing to the creation of tools and technology? And then to your earlier question, how far can AI go? I invite you to look up AI agents. This is something that's really emerged within the last couple of months, and how a lot of these tools are looking at creating agents, or essentially people that are entirely Gen AI. They're not just chatbots, but they're actually doing tasks at all times in the background. They exist on servers and they're actively working to accomplish certain goals. So as we go forward, and we're responding to these ethical issues, we all need to be aware of our own experiences, our own lived experiences. This is emotional for a lot of people. It's not just black and white. It's not just automated responding to these issues. We are feeling them. And they have real benefits and they have real detriments to our everyday life. Think about values. Think about the values of technology. Think about the values of communication when it comes to this technology. Think about how values exist individually as well as in different contexts and communities. And remember that as we continue to normalize these things, we also might run into issues of overuse and being blinded by using it and not being able to critically think as we continue moving forward. So in conclusion, how do we address these issues? This is really quick, folks. Keep learning, don't stop learning, stay curious about how all of this is working. Exercise a healthy degree of caution, as I mentioned at the beginning. Never stop asking questions and wondering about how all of this is working and how it all sits in our society. And communicate, really discuss all of this. It's important to have these conversations because, we can think about it individually forever, but where we will move forward is as we communicate with each other. So thank you so much for being here today. And if you're online watching this in a future session, thank you for watching. Stay tuned for future workshops, and a feedback form will get sent out later this quarter, asking for your feedback. Yeah, thanks everybody. I'm going to stop the recording now.